Okay, welcome to part one of South Asia. In this region, we're including India. This is where, again, some of people can question, wait, India is, makes sense, South Asia. Pakistan, this is particularly, a lot of people would identify more as Middle East. And you'll understand when we talk about the colonial history here, why it's actually part of this region. We have Bangladesh, which interestingly we'll discuss was actually part of Pakistan until there was an independence movement. We have Nepal up here nestled right in the Himalayas. Bhutan, I think we talk about this when we get to social economic indicators at the end. Bhutan has a separate index where they say we shouldn't measure the world based on GDP or like a country's success or development. We should measure it based on a happiness index, and they claim to be one of the happiest countries in the world. They really have a tight control on tourism here. Sri Lanka, which is down here, it's an island, and the Maldives, which are down here. It's a very low-lying archipelago of islands and atolls, and very, very beautiful, pristine areas still. And then there's also, I should say, several other islands. When I give, so previously when we do this class on campus rather than online, I have the students do these quizzes, these map quizzes in class. They actually really struggle with a lot of these. I really don't envy them. But there's a lot of the island territories, and I usually count this as extra credit, but a lot of the island territories, especially when you get to Oceania, it's really complicated. Okay, so South Asia, here we got our objectives outlined for you, for your notes. Some of the key concepts we're going to talk about. So common characteristics. Why this region is considered a region. It's the second most populous region in the world, for starters, the first being East Asia. India itself is the second most populous country in the world with about 1.2 billion, so it's really just right behind China. It is a distinct landmass, so geographically speaking as well, like physically, it's a distinct landmass separated from the rest of the Eurasian continent. So it's called a subcontinent, and it's separated by the Himalaya Mountains. So remember we've talked about before, and I believe this is actually a question on your exam. So we got to South America, we talked about subduction zone, and the Andes Mountains as well as North America, the Cascade Mountains are formed based on a subduction zone where you have one plate going under. As the plates come together, pushed together, one plate basically is sliding underneath the other plate, and it gets so far inland and down, and it melts, and it prevents magma, and this creates volcanoes. Whereas the Himalayas were actually two plates. It's amazing to think. It's two plates that crashed together, and they just both went up. So imagine, if you think about the plate that we're currently on, we're in a hot spot in Hawaii, if you are in Hawaii, and it moves a couple of centimeters or inches every year. I think it's like 2 or 3 centimeters. So imagine if a plate moves little by little, even if there's an earthquake, what a plate maybe moves like a few feet. So over, I can't even imagine how many years, but over a massive amount of time, these plates have just emerged, like pushed together and formed this massive mountain range. So once again, we've got India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. And a huge factor besides the geographical being a subcontinent, what really brings this region together is a shared history and culture. You might be thinking for some of these, how do they have a shared culture? I don't look at Pakistan and I don't look at Sri Lanka as having a shared culture at all. One is Buddhist and one is Muslim, and what do they have? But again, shared history. And there is a strong influence in underlying culture components of this region, much like what we saw in South Asia, or East Asia. Sorry. So environmental geography, this is a region which really has diverse landscapes. We have some of the driest lands, especially up in Pakistan, for example, and we have some of the wettest lands in the world, in Bangladesh, for example. We have very severe and complex environmental issues. A lot of this is due as well to just having so many people. It's also due to the lack of development, the need for this region and historically as well to push in order to grow enough agricultural products for people, for such a booming population. So there's a long history of environmental problems. The amount of space that there is has really affected the habitats for animal populations, and although there have been some gains in conservation efforts over the last couple of decades, it's really still quite a dire situation for a lot of species. So some of the things we'll talk about, the Green Revolution, we'll actually talk about it in this, we'll talk about it later. The Green Revolution, where there was this agricultural revolution, refers to an agricultural revolution. Unfortunately, though, when we talk about agricultural revolutions, this is one thing we talk about actually in Geography 2000. When we talk about agricultural geography, when we talk about agricultural revolutions, we tend to think about technological revolutions, and this could be domestication of certain species and plants and animals, for example, would have been the first agricultural revolution. When we refer to the Green Revolution, we're talking about more of a chemical and pesticide input. So basically, they were able to increase dramatically, I believe it was wheat, the production through fertilizers and pesticides, but this led to a lot of environmental devastation, ecological devastation related to the use of these chemicals. Um, Over here in Bangladesh with the Ganges River, uh, so what happens is we've got the Himalayas up here. Water comes down, bringing sediment, bringing everything from 20,000 feet above sea down to here. And the rivers you can see come and reach here. This delta, a few rivers come and reach here. And this area naturally floods. There is little we can do to actually control it. You hear about annual flooding, thousands of people die yearly. This is also one of the poorest regions in the world, Bangladesh, I should say, in particular, poorest countries, and it's also one of the most densely populated places in the whole entire world as well. Deforestation is also a huge problem in this region. A lot of the deforestation is actually related to human activities, not so much for selling lumber as for human consumption, cooking, um, construction, needing wood. So again, a lot of um, environmental, a lot of air pollution. Air pollution is a major problem, especially in the big cities. Much as you would find, like in New Delhi, for example, the same as you would find in Beijing, very, very contaminated airs. And again, this is a lot of people in a small space. Environmental regulations are not nearly as controlled. You also have a lot of uh, economic and manufacturing activities as well. So we actually said there's BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, and China are four countries that have very strong economies that have been growing. So they're kind of in this transition between peripheral or semi-peripheral to core nations. So you can see here throughout you've got extensive deforestation in the green lined areas. We have desertification, so land being turned into deserts. Salinization, so again regarding irrigation activities up here in the drier area where irrigation is required, and then you have rapid rates of evaporation. Areas of groundwater depletion, so quite an extensive area in the same area up there. A lot of the coastal areas, especially here in Bangladesh, this area is very vulnerable to sea level rise, and these problems will continue to be exacerbated over the next several decades as we continue to see the effects of climate change. A lot of coastal pollution you can see pretty much along the entire coast, and a lot of this also goes back to the use of pesticides. You get runoff, and the pesticides and the chemicals wash into the system, and they wash out to the ocean, and you can create these dead zones. We actually have a huge dead zone here south of the United States of the Mississippi River, where you have all this chemical runoff going into the Gulf of Mexico. And then you can see as well, a lot of the rivers are being diverted for irrigation. We have the same, so with the Narmada River, there is a proposed dam that would go in, and this would have it would displace a lot of people, a lot of farmers, a lot of displace, much as like we talked about three Three Gorges Dam displaced a lot of wildlife, and then obviously with dams as well, it's concerning regarding. There's a lot of factors that are related to dams, but again, it's to help for primarily for irrigation more than it is for flood control on that side. So some of the natural hazards, this region is quite plagued by natural hazards. Some of them we just talked about, flooding, especially in Bangladesh, deforestation, desertification, and population growth is a major concern. We don't have the same draconian practices as we saw with China, so this is a population that's still growing. Pakistan as well has a very fast-growing population. One of the things that's unique about this region is the monsoon. Now, when I ask students what monsoon is, most of them associate it with rainfall. But monsoon itself is actually not the rainfall. And honestly, if somebody were to ask me, I really wasn't thinking about it, or I don't teach this, I would probably say, oh yeah, monsoon rains. Monsoon is actually the seasonal shift between a wet and a dry period. And this is a seasonal shift that's related to the pressure systems and the temperatures of the air. So basically, you have high pressure in the top right picture, for example. So you have a high pressure system and it pushes the air down to low pressure. And so this is how you get the winds going from the continent out to the sea. But these are very dry winds. There's no place for moisture up here to come from. So very dry winds come out. And then basically you get the seasonal warming of the waters. This warm air is a low pressure system and starts to move upwards. So it creates the complete opposite effect of the winds. And this brings with it all of the moisture from the coast. And that brings the rain. So the rainfall is actually associated with monsoons. It's called an orographic rainfall. So this is basically this really heavy, what we associate as monsoon rains. It's monsooning out, right? It's a monsoon. But it's the rains that we associate with the monsoon, but the monsoon is actually this pattern of the wind. And some regions actually do, especially up here, are affected by this rain shadow effect. So rain shadow is, if you think about on the island of Oahu, we have the windward side and the leeward side. So the wind comes with the precipitation from the windward side. It hits the ko'olaus. The mountains basically suck any of the moisture, most of the moisture, out of the clouds, and by the time it gets to the other side, there's less rain. Some like rain shadow effects you can see. Seattle itself, Seattle, Washington, is actually in a rain shadow because of the Olympic Peninsulas, which got a lot more rain. East of the Cascades is also in a rain shadow effect. So rain shadow effects are really common. So it's this region up here where you can see the arrows don't quite make it through. That's in a rain shadow effect. And I find that so interesting because for the last several, not so much in East Asia, or it is still East Asia, we've been seeing a lot of droughts, and all of a sudden now we see this huge shift. So you can see here Sri Lanka actually has 2 peaks in their rainy season. But you can see this is for Mumbai, India. The rain is just off the charts, 25 inches in the month of June, July, it looks like. This is Pakistan, so this is the extreme dry area. This is Pakistan, Islamabad, which is up here. So this actually is still within the monsoon area, gets some rain. This is another part of India. You can see huge, massive rainfalls. Bangladesh, again, this is Dhaka, which is the main city, the province, or the capital. Massive amounts of rainfalls. And again, you can see there's in some other places it's not quite as high of rainfalls, but you can still see the seasonal influence. So we can see quite the temperature differences as well. You have tropical rainy, tropical monsoons, tropical wet and dry. And then here as well, this is tropical monsoon climates. This is Bangladesh getting hit very hard by the monsoons. And then we have a mild mid-latitude climates. So these are continental climates. And then this is the mountain complex. This is in the rain shadow. And again, here we have the dry climates, so very diverse climate systems. Basically, this region, I'm not going to go into it too much, but we divide this region into four distinct subregions. So the mountains of the north, the Himalayas, we have the Indus Ganges lowlands. This is the areas that is largely hit by the monsoon rain. So that's what we call the monsoon, the orographic rains. You have peninsular India. This is technically a peninsula. And then we have the southern islands, the Maldives and Sri Lanka. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop there and continue on with population as part 2. Have a great day.